Isn't it curious that this is the worst day in American history, according to the left, the media, and Nancy Pelosi? And it's Judicial Watch who came up with this information. First up are these new documents. You may have already seen news about them that we received from the Metropolitan Police Department here in the District of Columbia concerning the police officer involved killing of Ashli Babbitt on January 6th in the U.S. Capitol. A Lieutenant Byrd shot and killed Ashli Babbitt as she was seeking entry into one of the House chambers, the House gallery, where the members were. She was crawling through, and he shot and killed her, even though, as the documents show, she was not armed. And as the documents further suggest, and the investigation suggests strongly, he did not issue any warnings to stop. Typically, there's an escalation issue related to police, the use of force by the police. You start with one area, one force option, and then you escalate it potentially to deadly force. Now, there are circumstances where you immediately have to go to deadly force. And in my view, these circumstances were not present here. And this shooting was unjustified. And as I said in a commentary associated with the release of this material, there was no good reason for the shooting death of Ashli Babbitt. It was a bad shooting. And I'll give you the details now. The documents are available at Judicial Watch's website at judicialwatch.org. So you can look at the 53 pages of documents there. 532 pages of documents that we received from the DC Metropolitan Police Department. Again, we had filed this lawsuit in May of 2021 after waiting for months for records. What's going on here? It wasn't rocket science. There was a shooting death involving a police officer. Where are the records? We all know how this works by now, given what happened in the George Floyd episode. The material needs to be released quickly and publicly, and it wasn't done in this case. And as you know, or may know, the name of the officer was withheld until he came forward in a friendly interview on the NBC networks. Babbitt, as I said, was shot and killed as she climbed through a broken interior window in the U.S. Capitol. She was unarmed, and she was a U.S. Air Force veteran. 14 years she had been in our military. The identity of the police officer who killed her was kept secret by the Pelosi Congress. The Pelosi Congress is very concerned about police accountability and reform, and has talked about defunding the police. And of course, the federal authorities knew about who he was, and the DC authorities knew who he was. Yet it was massive secrecy around it. And it was Judicial Watch who came in and got the core documents about this investigation. Now, Justice Department in April of 2021, they issued a statement declining any prosecution. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia and Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice will not pursue criminal charges against the U.S. Capitol police officer involved in the fatal shooting of 35-year-old Ashli Babbitt. Now, what's interesting about this is that we received in these documents a letter, and it's not clear to me. Well, I'll read you the letter first. It was a letter written from the assistant U.S. attorney to an assistant chief in the police department here in D.C. It's April 14th. It was the same day that the press release was issued by the Justice Department. And this is why I'm going to read you the letter here. Please let this serve as official notification. The office has considered the facts and circumstances surrounding the alleged use of excessive force in the above captioned case, the shooting death of Babbitt by Capitol Police Lieutenant Michael Byrd. We have decided to decline criminal prosecution of the above listed officer as a result of this incident. Accordingly, this matter is referred to you for whatever administrative action you deem appropriate. I don't know what the Metropolitan Police Department can do in terms of administrative action for a police officer who's not a member of the department, but that's another matter. But this is the curious language. The office has considered the facts and circumstances surrounding the alleged use of excessive force. So what's interesting is I'm not sure, based on this material, was there a request for prosecution from the police department of Byrd? It's a big difference to, well, I shouldn't say it's a big difference, but there's a substantial difference between the police department saying, look, we investigated it. There's nothing here. Here's our information, in case you want to kind of look at it yourself, but we don't recommend a prosecution. Or they could have said, we recommend a prosecution, and it was declined. That's a big difference. Don't you agree? And it's not clear what happened here. One could read it either way, right? So we want more information. So however important are the documents we receive, there are additional documents that we're seeking through separate litigation. So Judicial Watch just can't, we don't just sit and wait and hope, oh, well, maybe we'll get these other documents. If we think there are other documents that are useful out there to the public interest, we go and ask for them and pursue them. And that's what we're doing separately, in addition to the case that we have that uncovered these astonishing records of the police investigation of Lieutenant Michael Byrd. Metropolitan Police Department Internal Affairs Division report indicates they interviewed Byrd and another Capitol Police officer on January 6th at 7:38, and the interview was recorded. The investigators note that Byrd, on duty that day since 7 a.m., was only equipped with the service weapon, but no ASP, which is a telescoping baton, or pepper spray. He last qualified on the shooting range on October 22nd, 2020, the report notes. But Byrd declined to provide a statement until he could consult an attorney. So immediately, Byrd didn't want to cooperate. And I don't blame him. He's being asked questions by the cops. He probably should refer to an attorney, especially given the nature of what he did. The records include a January 6th Internal Affairs Division report. This took about, this was, I guess, issued the day of the incident. Someone of an interview conducted of a U.S. Capitol Police sergeant whose name is withheld. So we don't know any of the names of the witnesses in these documents. So they're all blacked out. Someone on the House floor shouted, there should have been shots fired. There have been shots fired. Sergeant Blank was advised that the sound was breaking glass, not gunshots. He radioed the report of gunshots was incorrect, that it was glass breaking. Sergeant Blank was approached by an officer who advised that the sound was in fact gunshots. Sergeant went back over the radio and reported that there were gunshots on the House floor. So there was some confusion there. Sergeant Blank walked out of the House chamber into the speaker's lobby and observed glass being broken out of the doors and windows at the east end of the area. So this is the video, you've probably seen the video of the Babbitt shooting from that video from the outside, the other side where Babbitt was entering. So that's what he's referencing. Those doors that Babbitt was trying to get through, those are the doors to the speaker's lobby. He observed that an officer and Lieutenant Byrd had taken up positions and had their guns out. Sergeant Blank took his gun out and positioned himself behind a pillar in the speaker's lobby. So there, you had three officers with their guns drawn, aimed at these doors. A glass panel came completely out of one of the windows, and a protester started to come through the opening. There's a lot of screaming, and Sergeant, you heard someone yelling, "Get back, get back." Sergeant Blank was positioned furthest away from this barricaded door, and Lieutenant Byrd was positioned closest. Sergeant Blank observed a white female protester was climbing through an opened area where the glass panel had been knocked out. He heard a gunshot, and this female fell backwards through the opening. The crowd on the other side of the barricaded east doors began to step back, and some put their hands up in the air. Sergeant Blank observed Lieutenant Byrd step back just after hearing the gunshot. He did not see anything in the female protester's hands prior to the gunshot. So he was furthest away of the three officers who had their guns drawn, observing Babbitt, who turned out to be Babbitt, and he could see there was no weapon. Sergeant Blank never went on the other side of the barricaded east door, so he didn't go to the other side where Babbitt fell back into. He also did not know that it was Lieutenant Byrd who shot his gun until he talked to him moments after it occurred. Lieutenant Byrd looked upset and stated, "I was the one who took the shot." In a written transcript of the interview, the aforementioned U.S. Capitol Police Subsergeant, and actually it appears we know his name, he says during the interview that the woman climbing through the window was wearing a gray sweater. And this is what he says, because, you have the report. And this is why you should look at all the documents, because there's a report and then there's a transcript from which the report had been summarized. Sometimes it doesn't mix or they don't fit together. Sometimes the report writer takes liberties in characterizing, arguably in a way that's not accurate, what is actually testified to. I saw Lieutenant Byrd I don't know if it was before or after, because I was trying to figure this out, but there's one point where I remember seeing him and he kind of went like this and came back up again. I don't know if that was from him taking the shot and then stepping back from that shot, or if it was before that. I can't, no matter how I tried to rack my brain, I can't figure out what happened. But so I don't know if something happened to him which caused him to take the shot or not. I actually did what I did, but I don't know. I don't know. It was a crazy, hectic moment, and I don't know what else I could add to it. So what I think is interesting about this testimony is that it looks to me like Byrd was behind the pillar, took the shot, and stepped back. So when Ashli Babbitt's lawyer has complained that Babbitt was ambushed, this is corroborating evidence. And I don't mean and in the sense that Byrd was lighting, was not necessarily visible to Babbitt, or which to me wasn't warned, and she was shot. Now, the fact that she was unarmed doesn't mean a person who is unarmed, let's be clear, can be a deadly threat or cause great physical harm to someone. So sometimes shootings are justified in that regard. It's hard to me to justify this shooting given what Babbitt at the time was doing, and evidently the fact that Byrd was back, hadn't issued warnings to stop, that the gun just popped out and she was shot. The interview asked the sergeant if he saw anything in the woman's hands as she was climbing through the window, and he replies, "I didn't see anything in her hands now." Asked when he realized Byrd shot the woman, the sergeant replied, "I said, what do you know?" And then he was like, I was the one who took the shot. And I was like, speaking of Byrd's reaction, the sergeant said, "No, his eyes are red. You could see he was visibly upset. And he just, kind of comfort him and told him, we got to get out of here." The interviewing agent asked the sergeant about Babbitt being shot. "Did you go up to her?" He said, "No, I maintained my position." So after the shooting, Byrd had the wherewithal, at least, to direct him and others to go down to into the subway, and so they further evacuated the area. Now you have to remember, there's a big crowd on the other side of that door. There were police near or coming up in that area as well. So that has to be part of the analysis here as to whether the shooting was something that should have happened. Again, another summary report of an interview of another U.S. Capitol Police officer by the Internal Affairs Division investigator. Now, it looks to me like this was some sort of administrative inquiry. Not clear if it was even a criminal investigation, but that's for others to try to figure out as we get more documents. And frankly, the government should be forced to answer more questions on this. He did not see Miss McEntee, which is who Babbitt was sometimes referred to as, in possession of any potential weapons. The report concluded he reiterated So he thought it was important that he did not observe that she was armed. The U.S. Capitol's police officer claimed that Lieutenant Byrd was shaking. He did not say anything. Byrd was nervous, teary-eyed, and appeared very upset, his voice also shaky when he called for medical assistance over the radio. Lieutenant Byrd was still very upset. Now, to be fair to Lieutenant Byrd, it could have been a good shooting and he would have been upset. It could have been a bad shooting and he could have been upset. So the fact that he's upset is it just shows that he's a human being one way or another. In the January 16th, 2000 interview transcript of the same officer who witnessed the shooting, he reported that a man with a beard and a suit attended Babbitt after she was shot, and both he and the sergeant above believed the man with the house sergeant was with the sergeant of arms office. So there was another official on the other side of the doorway. And again, he was shaky, describing Byrd. He was teary-eyed, you can just tell. I ain't going to say when someone regrets to do something. When somebody is just nervous, they rub their head, they pace back and forth. That's kind of, an odd way of putting it, don't you think? When asked if he heard any verbal commands given by police prior to Babbitt being shot, he replied, not at that point, and then I do not recall that. Another Capitol Hill police officer interviewed on February 4th, 2021, advised that prior to Babbitt's being shot, he did not hear any verbal commands, although I think he said he might have not have been able to because he had his radio in his ear. But, fact is, there's little evidence that Byrd issued any commands at all. The only evidence to that effect was a man who claimed to be in the House chambers. I don't know. It looks to me like it could have been one of those members of Congress. I haven't figured that out yet. Or it could have been a police official. I don't know. But he's not identified. And he called and they recorded the interview with him. The man said he saw Lieutenant Byrd position himself behind a pillar and claimed he heard Byrd shout loud verbal commands stating that he would shoot. The interviewee also said Byrd fired twice. He went on to say that he felt Byrd had saved several people's lives through his actions. According to the transcript, the interviewee reached out to the Metro PD to give his statement. Again, this is important while you read the transcript, because you're going to see that his affirmation that verbal commands were said, that he said shoot, he's going to shoot, but that wasn't actually what he said. In the transcript, the interviewee said, we started talking about evacuating all the members, or we didn't really have that conversation, which I think he means the opposite there. He went on to say of Byrd, he was yelling, he was giving commands. He was saying, I will shoot. He was saying some other stuff. I couldn't clearly make out what he was saying, but he was definitely giving commands, no question about it. I don't know. That's a little less clear that he said, I will shoot. And of course, folks who were near to him didn't report that. And of course, you can watch the video, and I don't think the video depicts him ordering out. Certainly, the audio of the video that's been famously out there, I don't think you can hear him say anything in that video as well. And this witness goes on to say, Byrd did everything he could do. He was by himself, which wasn't true. We were defending the front door and they were shaking it, which is true. He went on to claim that Byrd fired 2 shots, although I think he only fired 1. And the interviewee said he had a conversation with Byrd after Byrd shot Babbitt. He claimed that Byrd was giving commands and threatening to use lethal force. So again, it's pretty clear that Ashli Babbitt had no weapon. They did find a penknife, what they call a Paraforce folding knife, in her pocket. Although it's not even clear where it was found. It's a little bit weird there. But she had no weapon in her hand, excuse me. So this is pretty big stuff, don't you agree? It's interesting. And forgive me for going through the detail, But isn't it curious that this is the worst day in American history, according to the left, the media, and Nancy Pelosi? And it's Judicial Watch who came up with this information. And, there's news this week about the totalitarians committee, one party committee, trying to jail its political opponents for objecting to, as the law allows for, subpoenas over their harassing investigation. They're talking about jailing their political opponents while ignoring and refusing to release information related to incidents like this on 1/6. So the 1/6 investigation is about jailing more political opponents of Nancy Pelosi while protecting Pelosi's culpability because she's responsible for the police on the Hill. She's queen of the Hill, as I say, as House Speaker. The police department is an agency of Congress, the U.S. Capitol Police Department. They don't have the transparency requirements that other police departments do. And it was Judicial Watch who had to go outside the Congress to get these records from the Metropolitan Police Department. Believe you me, we're focused on the Capitol Hill Police as well. We've got lawsuits there suing Congress to get access to this information. But Nancy Pelosi ought to be the subject of a 1/6 investigation. The Capitol Police need to be the subject of a 1/6 investigation. These previously secret documents show there was no good reason to shoot and kill Ashli Babbitt. And the Biden-Garland Justice Department and the Pelosi Congress have much to answer for over their mishandling and cover-up of the scandalous killing of an American citizen by the U.S. Capitol Police. So I encourage you to look at these documents directly, draw your own conclusions. As I see, and I laid out the mitigating evidence here on behalf of Lieutenant Byrd. Now, did I come up with material here, or Judicial Watch uncover material here that says he needs to be prosecuted? I don't know. Did I come up with material here that says he needs to be fired? I don't know. But I've been doing this work long enough to know that a police officer who made similar decisions would probably be fired. And my view is that because Ashli Babbitt is a Trump supporter, her death was treated differently, and the investigation and the decisions about whether to hold Lieutenant Byrd or anyone else accountable was marred by politics. So this is not a clean investigation. Let me be more clear here. Any killing in DC or any crime in DC that has a political component is usually messed with by the politicians or infected by politics and is resultingly mishandled, or you have the kind of what I would call a maladministration of justice oftentimes. So it's near, and my guess is that's true in your local city, or if you live in a big city or even a small town. If there's a crime that touches on a political figure or involves politicians, however often indirectly, things get messed up a little bit. And so let's not be naive that this shooting death of a Trump supporter, there's a strong political push from one way against prosecution, against full accountability. Now, Lieutenant Byrd, for instance, infamously left his gun in a bathroom, from what I recall. Remember that? I remember that. So just compare and contrast the handling and the public concern about the shooting death of this unarmed woman by a police official with the alleged concerns that the left has had and others have had with the shooting deaths of other individuals, usually who were doing something much more egregious than Babbitt was doing. Let's be clear, Babbitt shouldn't have been doing what she was doing, but she also shouldn't have been shot for doing it without fair warning. Babbitt, in my view, Byrd made an awful mistake here. And I think there needs to be further investigation by authorities into his culpability and the level of accountability for that mistake. As I said, there could be, it was someone said, I skipped over it. The interviewing agent then asked the sergeant several questions, saying, and I know this is kind of obvious, but I'm going to ask it anyhow. You work for the Capitol Police Department for blank now, right? Sergeant replies, yes. And the agent asks, this is not a typical day, was it? Definitely not my craziest day there. I think he meant to say the opposite. Nothing like this has with now, has it? No, I'd say the closest one was when we had the shots fired back in 2004 and 5 in the Rayburn building, which is a House office building. The agent continues, not to pull your man card at all, but was this a frightening situation? Sergeant replies, oh yeah. The sergeant continues, oh yeah, I'm not afraid, I was scared shit. So he was afraid. And I have no doubt the people involved were afraid. But the training and the rules require you to take steps to protect life and act within the law, even if you are afraid. So, as I said, I think Byrd should be fairly treated, but Babbitt should be fairly treated as well. And there shouldn't be assumptions made about how this shooting happened because of Babbitt's politics. So here the evidence is pretty clear. The left is angry the Judicial Watch got this and exposed it because it blows up their narrative that January 6th is something that needs to be requires only Republicans or Trump supporters or conservatives or you name it as being awful human beings. But here, an innocent human being was shot and killed. And so Judicial Watch is proud of this work. It's one of many Freedom of Information Act lawsuits that have recovered other documents about not only the shooting death of Ashli Babbitt, but the death of Officer Sicknick, which was falsely attributed to the riot. It turned out it was not a riot, it was natural causes. And now we're in court right now against the Congress for all the videos of January 6th. They don't want to turn over any of the videos. They're saying it's not a public record and that your interest as a citizen as to what happened that day doesn't outweigh Congress's prerogatives in that regard. In fact, we asked for discovery to get information from the police department about how they were maintaining records. And the Pelosi Police Department doesn't want to go under oath or provide any information in that regard. So we're now in a court fight right now on that. And of course, we sued for records about Pelosi's efforts to work with the Pentagon as part of a potential mutiny against the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And we have more records coming out from from federal law enforcement about the riot that are again going to be, I think, may not be surprising to many of you, but which will, I think, garner additional public interest. So all I can say is thank God for Judicial Watch, because if left to their own devices, the corrupt media and the totalitarians running our Congress right now would keep this all covered up forever. I mean, that it took a lawsuit to get this information out, this basic information about one of the most important days we're told in American history. Not since the War of 1812 has anything like this happened. Yet we can't get the time of day from government agencies about what was going on. Makes you wonder about whether what we're told happened actually happened. Doesn't it? I think it does.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.